Hi, today I'm going to be making some roasted vegetables. This is a great recipe because it's really versatile in terms of the type of vegetables that you use. So once you know the template for it, you can make it your own. So today the veggies I'm using are carrots, onion, sweet potato, and a turnip. These are from the Vermont Youth Conservation Corporation's healthcare share program. They're grown locally here in Vermont, so it's exciting to be able to work with them. All right, so the first thing you want to do is peel and chop your vegetables. So I have some carrots here I've already peeled, and I'm just chopping them. For roasted vegetables, you want kind of larger pieces than you would use in something like a soup. So we're chopping, not dicing. And just do your best to make things fairly consistent in size so that they cook at a similar time. So for the onion, I'm just going to cut this in half. Take the peel off. If you have trouble with crying when you cut onions, the one thing that seems to be helpful for me is once I cut it in half and get the skin off is to rinse it under cold water. Seems to kind of decrease those fumes that come up and also kind of gets them off my hands as well. Always, if your eyes start to water, wash your hands and wash your knife. Maybe even rinse your cutting board. Will be helpful. Okay, and for sliced onion, it's a fairly simple way to cut an onion. So I'm just cutting off the root end here. And then I'll turn my onion and I'm just going all the way through. Consistent slices. I like to put all of my veggies in a bowl and then put the oil and spices on them just so that they get evenly coated. Okay, next up is a sweet potato. Just give that a rinse. Now you can leave the peel on. It's going to add a little bit more fiber and nutrition. But if you don't like the texture of the peel or you have someone who has trouble chewing, I would just peel it off. I know my kids are more it is their preference to have less peel when they're eating a potato. So I already have chopped up 2 sweet potatoes in my bowl here. And so this one, I say I'm going to peel. This one I'm going to peel just so that there's options for people who are eating them. With peeling vegetables, as you'll notice, sometimes you'll try one technique and it just doesn't seem to be going very well. Switch the direction you're going. So sometimes we're peeling toward ourselves, sometimes we're peeling away. For this one, peeling away seems better. And then also, I have 2 different peelers that I use. This one's newer, so it seems to be more sharp, but I like the shape of this one. So sometimes I just try a different peeler and see if that works better. Peelers are really, they're low cost. And if you have one that just doesn't seem to be doing a good job, it's one of those tools that is worth getting a new one. All right, so to cut our sweet potato, a larger sweet potato like this can be nice to just cut in half to break down a little bit. And then cut in half again. Always want to work flat side down so it's not rolling around on you. And try to make them about the same size as the carrot. While I'm doing my chopping, my oven is preheating to 425. 425 is a very common roasting temperature. Usually baking happens under 400 degrees and roasting happens over 400 degrees. So I always like to use 425 as a roasting temp. So this is a turnip. Some of the turnips I got are this size and some are this size. If you have smaller ones, you might use 2. If you're using a larger one probably in this recipe is going to be plenty. So give it a wash, and then we want to cut the top and bottom off carefully. Turnip's a little bit softer than my sweet potato was, so a little bit easier to work through. Now, usually you peel a turnip, and so you could use a peeler or you could use a paring knife. Let's see. Oh, the skin peels really easily. So I'm kind of going around a circle here. That's one option. You might also just kind of go away from yourself. it may be helpful for cleanup to peel right into your compost bowl. Turnips are great roasted. They're great in soups or stir fries. You can also eat them raw. You could grate them into salads or cut little slices like you might a radish. I can already smell it. You can also mash them with potatoes to make like a mashed turnip potato dish. All right, and now kind of similar method here. I'm gonna go in half to just give myself a smaller piece to work with. When I'm cutting, winter squash or potatoes or turnips, I really like this method of kind of putting my hand on top of the knife. Gives me a little more leverage cutting in. Again, these are fairly soft, but just because of their size, it can be nice to take that approach. And I think I'm only gonna need half of this turnip in my roasted veggies. Otherwise, I'm gonna fill more than a pan and I just don't need that much. So I'll save the other piece to cook later. All right, so we've got all of our veggies here to roast. Now we need 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And the range is really just depending on how many vegetables you have. I have a fairly good amount here, so I'm gonna start with a tablespoon. I do recommend measuring because if you put too much, it tends to get kind of soggy. I'm gonna do another half. And if you don't have enough, then they're gonna be kind of dry and might stick. Okay, and then a little bit of salt and pepper. If you're sensitive to salt or limit your intake, I would start with less. I usually find 1/4 to 1/2 of a teaspoon is plenty for this amount. And then some fresh ground pepper. Again, I would start with 1/4 teaspoon. If this is your first time making it, sometimes it's better to go on the low end, taste it, see what you like. You can always add a little bit more later. And then 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder or onion powder. I'm a little sensitive to garlic, so I put less. And again, the same, giving you the option that you can do the same. I'm gonna go with the amount that feels right for you. Now I'm adding some paprika. You could do smoked paprika if you like the smoked flavor, or you can just do the regular one. Ooh, I'm running low. I like paprika. I find it's a nice kind of mellow spice, but it just adds a nice flavor. And then the last thing I'm gonna add is some thyme. Thyme is strong. Some people, it can be overpowering for many of us. So if you have thyme, give it a smell. The other one that could work in here would be rosemary. And the same thing with rosemary is too much, can be definitely too much. So smell it and see if you like it. I would just do 1/4 teaspoon to start and see how that works for you if it's something you want to put in. A little goes a long way. Okay. I am going to mix this with my hands. I find that dishes like this sometimes just mix the best if you get clean hands into it and get everything mixed up. If you're not comfortable with that, feel free to use a spoon. Definitely use a large bowl. As you can see, I'm close to toppling out of my bowl here. And then once these are all mixed up, we're gonna lay them on our baking sheet. And I'm using parchment paper today. I find it just helps make cleanup so much easier and helps to avoid the veggies sticking at all. But if you don't have parchment paper, just use a regular baking pan. There should be enough oil in here that they're not gonna stick, but feel free to grease the pan if you feel more comfortable that way. Probably better to grease it the first time and see how it goes than having everything stick. Okay. So a good, important key to roasted vegetables is we want them to roast and not steam, and so we need them in a single layer. If they're sitting on top of each other, they tend to kind of steam rather than get roasted and crispy on the outside. So I just fit on my pan. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect here, but Okay, so these are gonna go in the oven. They take about 25 to 35 minutes, depending on the type of veggies that you're using. And definitely check halfway through, get your spatula in there, move things around, and then they will be done. All right, I'll be back when they are complete. So my roasted vegetables are done. They took about 30 to 35 minutes total. I put them in for 20 minutes. I put the timer on 20 minutes first and then gave them a stir and then put them back in for another 15 minutes. And so they're perfect. You'll see some nice caramelization in there. The onions are nice and tender and even caramelized a little bit. I always take a fork and just put it through a potato or a carrot and make sure they're nice and soft. But these are delicious. So let's give them a taste and see how our seasonings are. Remember that cooking is experimentation, it's practice, and it's trying something, tasting, and then seeing how you would modify in the future. So let's see here. Sweet potatoes are so yummy and sweet anyway. They really don't need a lot of seasoning. Let's try a few other things. I think it's delicious. I'm feeling like the seasonings are incredibly balanced. Nothing is jumping out. I'm not saying, whoa, that's a lot of thyme, or whoa, that's too much salt. It is kind of perfectly balanced. So I'm going to put the amounts that I used in the description for the video so you'll have those. But again, for you, if you taste it and think, huh, it's missing something, maybe it does need a sprinkle of salt. Maybe it does need a little bit more onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, thyme, whatever seasonings you or you used. And again, if you don't have those on hand, if you're kind of new to cooking and don't have a full spice cabinet, feel free to just stick with salt and pepper. I often roast just with olive oil and salt and pepper, and you're still going to get all those great flavors out of your veggies. So I hope you give this a try. Roasted veggies are great. Again, side dish. They work really well to cook and then keep in your fridge for a couple of days and kind of add to meals as you need some veggies.